We're going to do a little bit of experimentation here. So we're going to do a test reading of a short story. That's a joke because none of my short stories ever end up becoming short. We're going to do a bit of a test reading on a short story titled Waiting for the Second Sun. 10,000 degrees. That was as hot as a furnace could get without melting a hole in the center of the world. A good thing it's not on the world. There was a way to make it hotter, of course there was, but the amount of fuel, time, and energy it would take meant the whole world would suffer more than it already did from the shortages and restrictions on fuel consumption. 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Wasn't that the temperature of the surface of the sun? Much less the restrictions on use of construction materials, materials that were sacrificial to the cause. Materials were scarce, expensive, and in high demand. To sacrifice just a small percentage of costly materials, much less the fuel, had to be for a good cause. There was finding the people able to build things, and expertise was in short supply. 10,000 degrees, and the furnace was done for, spent, a gaseous plasma that just dispersed into space, nothing left. As there was nothing left of the furnace at 10,000 degrees, in order to get things going again, there needed to be another furnace built. Since that furnace was in high orbit around Earth, away from what could be injured or destroyed by such heat, that same furnace would have to be built and shot into orbit, or the parts and pieces shot into orbit, along with a short army of individuals willing to risk their lives to build such a thing in the hazardous expanse of high Earth orbit. The restrictions on fuel, material, and personnel were not themselves so much for the greater good of the world as a whole, but economic leverage on the adversary few could prove was there. The bad guy in the shadows. What enemy would you suggest? The South, East, West, and North were teeming with villains and monsters who sought to subjugate the great American way, more or less than the powers who were to protect this great American way, the enemy within, as you might say. But this was the course every nation and state takes, as every living body on earth takes as well. They are born, they live, they pass on. Whether it was the man in charge of protecting the great American way, or the great American way itself, done in dust. That way, this great American way, was the world's way, one way or the other, until it is not. History has a peculiar way of happening, and the future has no choice but to become the past. As such, while 10,000 degrees wasn't enough to burn what needed to be burned, there was not much else left to nudge the temperature higher and hotter than that. What didn't leave people out in the cold on Earth. Mr. Bragg says it's just how long the temperature can hold out, how long the thing you're trying to burn stays at 10,000 degrees. You got to hold it there, like holding someone underwater. Is that so, Mr. Braun? Shall we go out there and blow on it like you would a campfire about to go out? We were 50 miles high and 10 miles away from our man-made sun, and still, with the furnace being so far away, we all felt the heat on our faces like we were standing inside a cook's oven. The furnace turned to vapor long before hitting 10,000 degrees. Long, long ago, there was no point in calling it a furnace anymore. It's just a ball of heat, just a cloud of plasma. But the chain reaction was still going, and would keep going for a short time before all the fuel was spent. It took us all a year and a half to get together all the fuel needed to start the chain reaction, and another year to get the furnace built, then another year to get the materials and fuel ready and get the whole thing shot into high Earth orbit before we kicked the thing off. Even then, the furnace itself wasn't complete until placed where it needed to be in orbit. All the garbage that needed to be burned was collected and placed on standby, while the final assembly of the furnace was going on. The fuel was contained and the trash tossed into the furnace. Give or take, it was 5 years of our lives to fail at something that was impossible to fail. 10,000 degrees. Wasn't that the surface temperature of the sun? How could anything last that long at that temperature? Nothing known to man, nothing found by man or made by man, not a damn thing. And still, here we are, watching the temperature slowly drop. It's at 8,000 degrees now. Soon, 7,000 degrees. Up in high orbit, the heat sheds off pretty damn fast. No air to hold the heat. The cold vacuum of space sucking in that precious heat. 10,000 degrees and a complete, absolute failure. The light given off meant only the station sensors could see what was going on. Mr. Dartel, our cook and enthusiast euthanasiast, that's what he called it, as if it were some sport, was still blinded in one eye for trying to look at the furnace reach 10,000 degrees through one of the port windows. As if we needed a cook, with all the prepackaged supplies on the station. Still, Mr. Dartel took it upon himself to have everything prepared, just like home. A damn thing to say for a man convicted of poisoning 13 people. A shame that resources were such a protected asset that the powers that be couldn't have just given old Dartel a good full zap and be done with it. Now we all sit in silence on the space station, waiting for when Mr. Dartel got the gumption to relive his past exploits. But, mildly blinded, Mr. Dartel sat in the back of the room and lamented his poor situation. We were all in a poor situation. Banty radioed from the station down to the command center. This was always a hit-or-miss endeavor, because Banty never paid attention to proper schedules and sometimes got a hold of command when there was just maintenance sweeping up the floors. "No luck," Banty barked through the microphone, getting one of the supervisors. "The whole thing's drawing down and we can see nothing is left but what we were trying to get rid of. The fuel canisters and the burn jets and the rocket engines and the nuclear drives. All that jazz. It's all gone. The whole furnace is liquid dust. But the trash is still there." Banty frowned, nodded and belched in the microphone. He grimaced at the outrage of his burp from the command center. The joke's on them. All of them. "Right. Yeah. We'll double-check." Banty replied to one of the experts back on Earth. "But we don't have enough fuel to kickstart the thing again. You know that. I know that." Banty listened for a moment, his face growing red. "For what?" "We don't have the furnace anymore. It's fried." "Yeah, right. Well, you guys do that. You all have the big brains and the big plans. For us, this is just another prison. And keep us in the loop. Yeah, well, we're good up here. Party time and all. Plenty of good times." "Yeah, well, same to you. Be seeing you." Banty tossed the headset on the console and glared at the rest of us. "Looks like we'll be here for a little while." This is just a test reading of the final draft. Reading it as I go through edits and revisions on the short story. Thank you for watching.